Typhoon Yagi made an incredibly powerful Category 5 landfall on Hainan Island earlier today, and it is moving over the Gulf of Tonkin now still as a Category 4. Here is Yagi's current intensity. We are going with 130 miles per hour and a pressure of 934 millibars. It's moving west-northwest at 13 miles per hour. Here is Yagi's current location at 20 degrees north, 109.5 degrees east. It is just barely in the Gulf of Tonkin. Most of the storm is still over land, though part of the eye is still over land as well. Here is Yagi's forecast. We have it weakening down to a Category 3 by the end of today, making landfall in around 20 hours' time, likely with winds of 105 miles per hour, weakening to 90 miles per hour shortly after that, and then making it to Myanmar, believe it or not, possibly still even tropical. Unlikely, but possibly still even tropical. Here is Yagi's current wind field. The majority of the wind field is hurricane force winds, with part of it being major hurricane still. It's obviously a Category 4. Category 3 would be the beginning of a major. And tropical storm force winds are extending up to the southern coast of China as well, so decently far inland. Here's what the other agencies are going with. JMA, JWC, and GFS are overshooting it. They're going with 140 miles an hour, and I believe Force 13 is fairly accurate. It might be 125 at this point. They're going with 125 miles per hour, Category 3. We're going with 130. Looking at satellite imagery, this is just visible satellite imagery. I have not looked at the infrared yet. So let's move on to the GFS so we can look at that infrared, and we'll also look at the visible imagery. Here is Yagi on the satellite imagery. Very beginning of those frames there is about 1 hour after landfall. Still a Category 5 at the beginning of that frame, too. Shortly weakening to Category 4 after that. And towards the beginning of those frames, it did look very, very good on satellite imagery. It was still a Category 5 at the beginning of that imagery. It's down to a Category 4 now, though. And the storm is weakening. Obviously, it's over land. And we expect that it will make landfall in Vietnam tomorrow. Likely as a Category 2. But the overall structure of the storm is degrading right now due to land interaction. And the eye of the storm is also suffering. It's cloud-filled now instead of being perfectly clear like it was last night and this morning when it made landfall. Here is the GFS model run. Let's look here. Yagi, just continual weakening all the way up until landfall, which is the first thing that the GFS has gotten right about Yagi. First thing they've gotten right in a while. Making landfall there, not directly at landfall, but 962 right before landfall. Considering the lower than normal pressure for the intensity, that's probably a high-end Category 2 landfall. Maybe grazing low-end Category 3 towards landfall, which would be a record. Vietnam, this part of Vietnam, I believe. I don't know about the entire country, but this part of Vietnam, I know, has never had a major typhoon landfall. And then the remnants just keep doing that, move back out over the Gulf of Tonkin at that point, and looks like they just skirt along the coast of Vietnam there. If it reforms in the Gulf of Tonkin, then which is probably not going to happen, but if it does, it wouldn't have a lot of time, I'd say, because the land interaction and the wind shear, I believe, is increasing. All right, let's go to satellite imagery. So the very beginning of these frames here, the very first frame here, is at landfall, I believe. Might be... Oh, no, it's just shortly after landfalls. So this is Yagi. That's Yagi's second landfall there. It's made 2 landfalls so far. That's its second landfall. Probably at about 155 miles an hour. Its second landfall. Its first one was at 160. And the cloud tops of the storm are decreasing. It's got all the little mini spirals in the storm that you can see, which happens when storms are moving over land sometimes, and sometimes with wind shear. But the storm overall has degraded massively since that second frame there when it made landfall at 155. The first frame I'm going to put a picture up on screen real quick of what it looked like when it made its first landfall as a Category 5. But the structure of the storm is decreasing. The eye has almost disappeared off this cloud top imagery. Well, the eye obviously hasn't disappeared because it's starting to become less visible. Whereas the eye was obviously very visible before. It reached Category 5 status twice by our analysis. The first one was on the night of the 4th, and the second one was last night, the one last night it held, I believe, for about 6 to 8 hours. But this is a very, very dangerous typhoon still. It's still packing a lot of power. It's still a Category 4. And Vietnam, it has its eyes set on Vietnam. So we just need... If this would just weaken as much as possible before it makes landfall, that would be good news. But don't expect this to be like a tropical depression at landfall. I'd say minimum probably like a mid-range Cat 1 at landfall. Maximum obviously would be like the worst case scenario would be it holds this intensity all the way up until landfall, which I doubt is going to happen because I believe increasing wind shear. I believe the wind shear is increasing. I'll have to check, but I believe the wind shear is decreasing and land interaction. So it's very unlikely it holds Category 4 status all the way up to landfall. But if it did, that would be really bad because the city of Hanoi would get basically a direct passover, and Hanoi is one of the biggest cities in Vietnam. But that's it for this update on Yagi. We'll probably have more to come. Anyway, like, subscribe, goodbye.